I'm Elaina Love, and I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about sweeteners, specifically low glycemic sweeteners and great sweeteners that you can use in your chocolates. So there's a lot of different sweeteners out there that can be used, and a lot of people have questions about sweeteners. And the first one I'd like to address is agave nectar. Is that good or is it not so good? The answer to that is in the amount of fructose that's in agave. Agave contains a very high amount of fructose. Now it's labeled as low glycemic, but when you look at how it acts in the body, it actually does raise the blood sugar specifically, and it is not good for the liver, and it can cause excess belly fat and weight gain. So overall, it acts very similarly to high fructose corn syrup. And my motto or saying is friends don't let friends eat agave. So agave is a sweetener that you will never see in any of my recipes unless it's a very old recipe, and I don't have any in my house or in my academy. The sweeteners I do like to use instead of agave are things like honey. So here I have a desert honey. It's a wild blossom honey, a raw blossom honey from Arizona specifically. So you want to try and find, if you're going to use honey, it is a higher glycemic sweetener. However, because it's a natural food and in its whole form, it's actually quite beneficial for our bodies in small amounts. So if you're sweetening maybe your chocolates with honey, even just a couple tablespoons, and you can bump up the flavor with stevia. Honey is an amazing food. It helps you to acclimate to the pollens in your environment, along with bee pollen if you choose to use that in your chocolates. So I really do love honey. I think it's a wonderful food, helping to support the bee industry because a lot of vegan people say, don't eat honey, don't eat bee products. But what I think a lot of people don't understand is that if you were to completely stop using any bee products and the beekeepers went out of business, all the fruits and vegetables that we eat, all the trees, there's so many things that are pollinated by the bees that produce as we know it would cease to exist without bees. So we really do need to support sustainable bee practices. I do think honey is good to use if it's local honey and that the beekeepers are taking good care of their bees. So just do your research on that. And I mentioned stevia as a booster or bumper sweetener. And here I have a couple different kinds of stevia. This is a liquid stevia. And really you don't need very much stevia. I would say in a whole batch of chocolate, maybe 15 drops. And it really depends on your own palate. I call it a booster because a lot of people don't like the taste of stevia by itself. But if you were to add a few drops of stevia to something that already had a teaspoon of honey or a few, even a quarter cup of honey in a whole batch of chocolate, it's going to make it taste more like the honey sweet flavor. And without having that stevia taste, you can use stevia to boost the flavor. I also have a chocolate flavored stevia here and a strawberry flavored stevia. So there's a lot of different flavors of stevia you can get and use as flavor boosters. So that's a really fun way to combine your sweeteners, is a little bit of honey and a little bit of sweet stevia. Another really great sweetener is maple syrup. Now maple syrup is not considered raw. However, none of us are really 100% raw anymore. As far as I know, most people, I would say a very small percentage of raw food are actually 100%. So maple syrup is one of those great sweeteners that you can add because it is in its whole form. It hasn't had any of the minerals taken out, so it's actually a high mineral food. It's grown in the United States or in Canada, so it's on our continent if you're in the US. So it's a really great local food to use as well, and I think it's very nourishing. And it has a great flavor, especially in chocolate. It's one of my favorite sweeteners to use in chocolate. And again, I don't use very much of it, maybe a quarter cup in a whole batch of chocolate, along with my stevia for boosting. And I also do use a powdered stevia as well. And it's just, you can buy the white powdered sweet leaf stevia, or, there's a lot of brands out there. Make sure when you're buying stevia that it's 100% stevia and it doesn't have fillers like inulin or glycerin. Like there's one brand in particular of stevia, and I'm not going to say which one, but just read your labels, that glycerin is there's more glycerin than stevia in the product. So you're actually paying less money, but you're paying for glycerin, and we really don't want that in our food. So really be a conscious consumer by reading your labels and making sure, even if you trust a brand, to continue to read it every time you buy it, because sometimes a company can take over another smaller company and they start changing the ingredients. And I've had that happen quite a few times. Another really great sweetener that I love is coconut sugar. This one happens to be from Trader Joe's. You can get coconut sugar from many different sources. And I like to grind it down right now. It's kind of in its granular form. I like to grind it down in my Vitamix blender into a fine, fine powder. The reason for that is when you're making chocolate, you don't want those little grits in your chocolate. So the finer you grind it, the smoother and more seamless your chocolates are going to be. The coconut sugar has almost a mapley flavor to it, so that's another alternative to the maple sugar. This again they're all heated. So all these sweeteners I've mentioned so far, except for the honey, are heated. So it's really I'm not really talking about raw sweeteners in general, because the only raw sweetener is dates, and that's kind of a little bit hard to use in chocolates unless you want a really soft chocolate. So really I'm just talking about types of sweeteners and glycemic indexes. Now agave I said is, even though it's considered low glycemic, it's not for your body. It's going to raise your blood sugar. Maple syrup is another high glycemic sweetener, so you want to use that in moderation, low amounts, and you can combine it with maybe the coconut sugar, which is a 35 on the glycemic index compared to maple syrup, which is a 55, and honey is also a 55. So just to give you kind of a range, sugar is considered, white sugar is 65, so it's not really that much higher glycemic than maple syrup and maple syrup and honey, but honey and maple syrup are more whole foods, so your body knows what to do with them. So you can use them safely if you use them in small amounts. How do you tell if a sweetener is too, if it's not good for you or if it's not working for you? What happens to me, because I I don't really use myself personally maple syrup or dates, I stick with things like the coconut sugar because it's lower glycemic, and I use it in small amounts. I will use honey in small amounts as well. Like the other day, I got a chocolate from the store that was a popular, known little kind of tart that you buy in the refrigerator section that's a raw food chocolate, but it was sweetened with maple syrup. And I shared it with a friend, so I only had half of it. And I was really, I could feel antsy and jittery in my body and a little bit irritable. So that's what happens to me if I eat too much sweet stuff, even good, healthy sweet stuff. So you want to just watch out for that. Like, how do you feel after you eat it? If you feel good and balanced and nothing feels off, if your body doesn't itch or you don't feel like you're getting yeast infections or things like that, you're probably doing okay. So just try and keep the sweeteners in balance. Don't overdo it. If you really want to go low glycemic, like low, you could sweeten your chocolate completely with stevia. You can use it in the powdered form like I mentioned before. And what I like to do to boost the sweetness of foods, such as chocolates, is add salt and things like cinnamon, cardamom, nutmeg. Those will all add extra sweetness to your food without actually adding a sweetener. So you could do stevia and cinnamon, which will give it a nice flavor and sweetness boost, and cardamom is wonderful in chocolate, or a little rose flavor, rose essence that I talked about. The medicine flower essences in a different video. The last couple sweeteners I have here in front of me are they're called sugar alcohols. Now most sugar alcohols I don't trust and don't believe in, things like sorbitol and maltitol, very hard on your system. They can cause diarrhea, they can cause a lot of gas and bloating. Xylitol is kind of a mixed bag. A lot of people find that it works for their body. It can cause more gas and bloating than other sweeteners do. However, if you have diabetes or cancer, or you're working with any kind of candida or yeast, the xylitol is going to be a lot safer because it's only a 7 on the glycemic index. So again, just use it in moderation, small amounts. It's not something you want to be doing every day, but you can do chocolate safely for diabetics with the xylitol in it. It's just a white powder. It looks like this. And it comes in a crystallized form. I use this a lot in my whipped creams and things that I want to stay white, but that my students are trying to get off sugars or they have candida. So we use the xylitol as a sweetener because stevia is just too intense. And then the other one is called erythritol, and it's another white one. And the difference between the two really isn't much in flavor. They both taste about the same. They both kind of have the same effect on the body. I know for sure that xylitol naturally occurs in our body and that it's really good for preventing cavities. It's also good for nasal infections and ear infections because it's antifungal, antiviral. So I've had people use a neti pat when they have like a nasal infection, and the xylitol will actually help it go away, as well as brushing their teeth like with a xylitol toothpaste. So it does occur in nature, naturally in our bodies, and it's from the birch tree, from birch bark. So if you buy xylitol, make sure it's coming from the birch tree. And the thing with the erythritol is it usually comes from corn. Not always, some kind of wood, but a lot of times corn cobs, which could be GMO. So you're not as sure that it's GMO free with erythritol. So just do your studying, do your homework, do your research on the internet, and you're going to find things pro and things con. But I want to just give you all the facts. I do use both xylitol and erythritol in moderation, and I feel fine. I actually feel better using those than I do using maple syrup or honey because it doesn't spike my blood sugar. And because I got into all of this because of candida and blood sugar issues, I'm really careful with the amount of sugars that I eat. So for me, these work. For other people, they're like, oh no, I'd never eat that because it's not natural. It is a processed food. So just to give you all the facts on that. So I hope you have fun making your chocolates. You can use maple syrup, you can use honey, you can use coconut sugar, you can use erythritol, you can use xylitol, you can use stevia. Go to purejoyplanet.com and all of these products are on there, I think except for maybe the honey and the maple syrup, but of course you can find those locally. And enjoy making your chocolates, and if you have any questions, you can send emails to purejoyplanet@gmail.com. And have a great day.